Trembling with fear, Modupe prepared for her next funeral. She dressed in her finest clothes and arrived at the event, wailing and performing her usual acts. But as she looked at the coffin, her body froze. She saw her own name boldly written on it, Modupe Tetete. Modupe was a young woman in her early 20s who lived in deep poverty. She struggled to find even one meal a day to satisfy her hunger. From sunrise to sunset, she worked tirelessly, moving from one farm to another, hoping to earn just enough to survive. She had no friends to lean on, no family to comfort her. Her life was lonely, and her small house stood quiet and empty. No one ever came to visit Modupe. She walked through the village alone, her head bowed low, dressed in tattered rags that barely shielded her from the weather. But life had not been always so cruel. Her parents had been among the wealthiest couple in their time. They had loved Modupe deeply and had given her everything a child could dream of: a warm home, good food, and a future full of promise. Tragically, that future crumbled when both her parents passed away in a tragic accident when she was only 4 years old. Everything she knew and loved was taken away from her in an instant. Her father's younger brother, Adeyemi, was meant to care for her. Instead, he saw her as a burden. Greed consumed him, and he seized all the wealth and property her parents had left behind for her. Without guilt or shame, he abandoned her, leaving her to struggle for survival in a world that has gone crude. Her life hadn't improved. She was still as poor as a church rat, scraping by on the few coins she earned from her daily labor. One day, she sat in front of her small hut, humming a song to herself while she washed a few ragged clothes. That day was worse than other days. She had no money to buy food, and her body was weak from hunger. Still, she managed to wash her clothes, even though she felt completely drained. A man came to her unexpectedly, greeting her warmly. "Modupe, how are you today?" he asked, speaking as if he had known her for years. She was shocked. No one ever came to visit her. "Do I know you from somewhere?" she asked, her voice filled with suspicion. The man laughed uneasily. "You do not know me, but I know you very well. All I want you to do is listen carefully. I have a job for you that will change your life for good," the man said. "So what is it, sir?" she asked eagerly, studying him closely. He was an old man, likely in his late 50s, dressed in an affluent agbada, the traditional Yoruba attire. Beads adorned his wrist and neck, giving him an air of wealth and authority. "You are to cry at people's funerals," he said calmly, "and you will be paid handsomely by me." "What?" she exclaimed, pausing in disbelief. "Who does that, sir?" She was utterly shocked. "If you want to leave this poor state you are in and rise in society, then you can do this," he said firmly, his eyes steady as he awaited her response. "But sir, who are you, and why do you think I am the best person for this?" Modupe asked hesitantly. "Why don't you stop asking questions and think about this for a moment?" the man replied firmly. Modupe fell silent and thought carefully. "I am tired, completely tired of poverty. No one has ever loved me, and I don't even have enough food to eat. Now, this man is promising me a life of luxury, just for crying at people's funerals. But what if this cost me more than I had bargained for? My mother always told me to be honest in all my ways, even when I was a child." She hesitated for a moment. No. My mother is watching me from above, seeing me suffer like this, and yet she does nothing. While I starve here, this man is offering me a way out. I will accept this offer and make some money." Realizing she had been lost in thought, Modupe looked up at the man. "I will do the job, sir. How do I go about it? The man looked at her, a mischievous smile creeping across his face. All you have to do is simple, he began. When you get to a funeral, cry your heart out, wail loudly for the deceased, and awaken the emotions of your grieving family. Use all your strength until you have none left. But remember, do not accept any payment from this funeral itself. Once the funeral ceremony is finished, do not go back to your hut. Instead, come to Alado River and chant these words 3 times. The corpse eater. Be careful not to shout. Chant in your normal voice. I will come and hold your hand for a minute while we both remain silent. After that, I will pay you handsomely for your efforts. However, there are 3 warnings you must never forget. First, you must not receive a single coin or gift from the funerals. Second, you must never wear footwear. Your feet must always be bare. Third, always wear the finest, most radiant clothes to every funeral. And lastly, you must not tell anyone about this arrangement. Modupe felt a chill run down her spine. She was a little scared. Is this job dangerous? She wondered, but she quickly brushed aside her fears. As long as poverty lives my life, I do not care, she thought to herself. Before leaving, the man added one. If you ever find yourself in trouble at a funeral, clap your hands 3 times and I will come to your aid. Then, without another word, he left hurriedly. Modupe began to prepare for her first funeral ceremony. That morning, she overheard whispers from busybodies in the village that Iya Ajani, the orange seller, had passed away the night before. Determined to make a grand impression, she went to Baba Maria, the famous clothes seller, and begged him for his finest clothes, promising to pay him back in a few days. Though skeptical at first, Baba Maria eventually gave her the clothes, moved by her persistence. Next, she took the fabric to the best tailor in town, known for sewing exquisite garments. She convinced the tailor to sew the clothes on credit, promising to settle the debt soon. Finally, the day of the funeral arrived. Modupe dressed her best, adorned with the finest jewelry and an elegant headgear. Her radiant outfit glimmered in the sunlight. But true to the instruction, her feet were bare. She stepped out of her hut and everyone was stunned, marveling at her beauty. Dressed in her radiant attire, she looked like someone from another world. However, when their eyes fell on her bare feet, they began to murmur and wonder what was wrong. When Modupe arrived at the funeral, the atmosphere was heavy with sorrow. The mourners wept bitterly for Iyajani, who had only one child and many grandchildren. Tears flowed freely as the ceremony began. Then Modupe started a cry. She did not know where the strength came from, but it surged through her like a flood. Her wailing was so loud and intense that it seemed to shake the very earth beneath them. Her words pierced the heart of everyone present, pulling them deeper into their grief. Iyajani, she began, her voice trembling with emotion. Why did you leave when the cock crowed? You are a coward, for you could not fight death face to face. You let it defeat you. They say the love and care of a family should be enough to conquer even the spirit of death. But still you left us. Yet we all loved you. Your sweet oranges were something none of us wanted to miss each day. But now, Modupe's voice cracked as she cried even louder, her tears flowing like a river. The mourners could not hold back their tears. Her words resonated deeply, and her grief felt like their own. After the funeral, the village gossipers gathered in small groups to discuss the event. They wondered aloud why Modupe had cried harder than the bereaved themselves. Maybe Mama Ajani was very kind to her when she was alive. Some speculated. After all, Iya Ajani was known for her generosity. Others dismissed it as a show. She's just being dramatic, so people will notice her, one said with a smirk. Yes, I have heard Mama Ajani's son is from the city. Perhaps she's planning to catch his eye and become his second wife, another added, and they all laughed. Meanwhile, Modupe walked silently along the road towards the river, where she would meet the man who had given her the job. Her mind raced with thoughts. During the funeral, she had seen something strange, something shocking on the coffin, and it seemed as though she was the only one who had noticed it. On the coffin, Modupe saw a name boldly written, and what disturbed her the most was that it belonged to one of the prominent chiefs in the village, Chief Bashorun. She decided she would ask the mysterious man about it when she got to the river. When she arrived at the river, she carefully chanted the words, ensuring her voice was calm and quiet. The corpse eater, the corpse eater, the corpse eater. Immediately the man appeared, emerging from the river. Modupe was startled but managed to hold her ground. Without a word, the man stepped forward and held her hands. For minutes, she felt a strange sensation, as if something had left her body. The man released her hands and stepped back slightly. To her horror, the lifeless body of Iya Ajani, the orange seller, appeared on the ground in front of her. Modupe froze, her body trembling in fear. I know you have 2 questions for me, the man said, breaking the silence. Here are your answers. The name you saw on the coffin is the name of the next target. Chief Bashorun will die in a few days, and you must attend his funeral to cry. As for this corpse, he continued, gesturing to Iya Ajani's lifeless body, do not worry about what I intend to do with it. That is not your concern. He handed her a large nylon bag. Overcome with curiosity, she opened it to find bundles upon bundles of money inside. Her eyes lit up with excitement, and a greedy smile spread across her face. Go! Leave now, the man commanded sharply. Without hesitation, Modupe grabbed the bag and ran. When she returned to her hut, she was overwhelmed with joy, marveling at her newfound wealth. She carefully hid the money, fearing someone might have seen her carrying it. The next morning, she paid off all her debts, bought new belongings, and renovated her once shattered hut. For the first time in years, Modupe felt what it was like to live in luxury. Over the next few years, Modupe attended 350 funerals. She cried at each one, just as she had been instructed. Her life had changed completely. She was now surrounded by friends, and everyone in the village admired her. Some even offered her money to cry at their loved ones' funerals, but she always refused, only attending funerals where names only appeared on the coffins of the previous ceremonies. However, something unsettling began to happen. Deaths became more frequent in the village. It started with little children, then young men and women, the crippled, the blind, the deaf, and finally the elderly. Still, Modupe did not care. Her greed had consumed her, and she refused to think about the consequences. One fateful day, she attended the funeral of a poor farmer. As usual, she looked at the coffin, expecting to see the name of her next target. This time, her heart stopped. The name on the coffin was Mr. Adeyemi Tetede, her father's younger brother. Modupe's thoughts swirled. At last, she thought, I can finally have my revenge on him and his family. On that fateful day, Modupe arrived at the funeral, prepared as usual, dressed lavishly in radiant clothes, though barefoot. The villagers were stunned at her appearance, whispering among themselves and pointing at her. She looked like someone who had truly made it in life. When the deceased wife, Olanike, saw Modupe, she was taken aback. Everyone in the village knew how Modupe's uncle had squandered her father's wealth, leaving her destitute and saddled with debt. Yet, she was standing tall at his. Olanike, despite her grief, managed a sheepish smile through her tears. She had always believed Modupe had a kind heart, even after all the injustice her husband had done to her. Modupe returned the smile, though inwardly she was conflicted. Modupe knew her emotions had to be hidden. She feigned a warm, forgiving smile, but quickly moved into her role. She began her cry, wailing with such intensity and delivering a dirge so moving that it pierced the heart of the mourners. Her performance was flawless, and the crowd was captivated. Once the ceremony concluded, Modupe discreetly glanced at the coffin and saw the name of her next target. Without lingering, she left. For days after the funerals, the villagers could not stop talking about Modupe. They marveled at her apparent kindness and a strength of character. Despite everything her uncle did to her, one woman said, she came to his funeral and cried as though she had loved him deeply all her life. She has a heart of gold, another villager added, shaking their head in admiration. Little did they know, Modupe's true motives were far darker than they could ever imagine. The villagers adored Modupe, believing she was a person who genuinely loved everyone. She never accepted invitations to festivals or social gatherings, further fueling the belief that her kindness was divine. They attributed her wealth to her good deeds, not suspecting her connection to the mysterious, frequent deaths in the village. Modupe now lived in the grandest mansion in the village, even larger than the king's palace. Her success was the talk of the town. One day, while walking through the market, Modupe bought various items, food, fruits, and other luxuries. As she reached for her purse, tied around her waist to pay the apple seller, a small dirty boy snatched the money from her hand. She immediately ran after him, but could not catch up. When she finally found him, he was devouring rice from Mama Bisola, the food vendor. The sight moved her. The boy's hunger was evident. Smiling faintly, she decided to let it go. As she turned to leave, she saw a familiar face, Bola Tito, the wife of a man whose funeral Modupe had attended just 7 months ago. Bola Tito greeted her warmly, but begged for forgiveness. "I am so sorry, Modupe. My son is just so hungry. He hasn't had a proper meal in days." Modupe froze, stunned by the memory of the warning the man had given her years ago. Never allow the relatives of the deceased to collect money directly from your hand. If they must, it must be through someone else, never from your hands. Her heart raced as fear gripped her. Dropping the items she had purchased, Modupe ran out of the market without a word. The villagers watched, puzzled, whispering among themselves about her strange behavior. Modupe dashed to the river and chanted the ritual words. The man appeared, but this time, his face was filled with anger. "Modupe, I have nothing to say to you. Complete the next assignment." He barked and disappeared. Trembling with fear, Modupe prepared for her next funeral. She dressed in her finest clothes and arrived at the event, wailing and performing her usual act. But as she looked at the coffin, her body froze. She saw her own name boldly written on it, Modupe Tetede. Panicked, Modupe fled the funeral leaving everyone stunned. What is wrong with her? The mourners murmured. She ran straight to the river, where the man awaited her. Modupe, he said coldly, go back and attend your funeral. There is no money for you today, because you didn't finish the assignment. Go back. Terrified, Modupe returned home, consumed by dread. She felt her mind unraveling, and fear gripped her soul. She knew the end was near. 4 days later, Modupe died. The villagers mourned deeply. They couldn't believe that someone so young, successful, and kind-hearted had just passed away at 31 years old. At her funeral, Modupe's spirit appeared. She wailed bitterly, this time with genuine sorrow. But no one could hear her cries. She followed her spirit to the man at the river, where she saw him dissecting her lifeless body. Terrified, she found the courage to speak. What are you doing with my body? The man looked at her coldly. The same thing I have done to everybody you have brought me. The graveyard is the richest place on earth, filled with untapped talents and potentials. Those families you cried for, their descendants will live in poverty for generations. Your wealth came at their cost. Modupe gasped, horrified. What about my riches? My success? What happens to all I have worked for? The man chuckled darkly. All the wealth you amassed will vanish. Your friends and family will fall into penury. Your legacy will be one of wasted riches and sorrow. Her voice trembled. You never told me this. Your greed blinded you. He retorted, his tone now commanding. I am not to blame. You made your choice, Modupe. Now, go and rest. With that, he dismissed her spirit. Moral lesson. Greed can blind you to the consequences of your actions. Never let the desire for wealth drive you to harm others. What other lessons did you learn from this story? Share your thoughts below.